purpose of Freethought Forum is to be vigilant to the encroachment of religion into government and to educate the general public as to what a freethinker is.
My thoughts give me power.
No scholar can map them.
No hunter can trap them. No person can deny.
Hello, welcome to Freethought Forum. I'm Catherine Fahringer, the producer of this show, and your host for today. This program today is going to touch on matters of church-state separation, and I latched onto my guest quite by accident. I was playing around with the flipper on the television set, and I caught 10 minutes of the Julius Sadowsky show. So I called Julius and I said, Julius, I liked what you were saying. Let's discuss it further on my show. So with me today, besides Julius, I have my friend Jeff Levan, a fellow freethinker, and Julius Sadowsky of the Julius Sadowsky Show. Welcome to the show. Thanks for coming.
Thank you, Ms. Fahringer.
Now, Catherine, please.
Catherine.
Right. Absolutely. We're on first. I didn't even call you Mr. Sadowsky. When I met you, I said, hi, Julius. Okay, I wanted to go back and talk a little more about what you were saying, because I only caught 10 minutes of it, about the church banners on the city property that were saying, come back to your home, the Catholic Church. Yeah. Regrese a su casa.
You know, it's perfectly all right. And the Catholic Church has used this slogan, Regrese a su casa, which is return to your home.
Yeah.
And it's perfectly all right. The only thing is that downtown there's a place for some banners, but they're vertical banners, about 3 or 4 feet long. And usually they have the little panda bear that an advertising company uses as a slogan up there. And then they have some other
yeah, they have one for SeaWorld, I think.
And things like that, yes. And then I was driving along, I looked up there, and it said something about, return to the Catholic Church. And I thought, wait a minute, I'm all in favor of, my mother was a Catholic, so I can't say anything against the Catholics. But I just can't see any group taking over the public's streets.
Well, you're absolutely right. And the funny thing is that, idiot that I am, as sensitive as I am to church-state, I guess perhaps even I have become kind of used to these things because they happen all the time. And I think now, my goodness, they had a big one up by my house with the Christian Science. Christian Scientists were having something, and that was across city property, tied from lamppost to lamppost or something.
Well, I looked into that, and there's a sign company that has a contract with the city, and they give the city a very small amount of money for the rights to put their banners across. And if you want a banner up there for a month, it costs you about $400.
Ooh.
But the city gets $20, $30. So actually, the way I looked at it, the sign company can give a banner to someone to sort of get their business.
Oh.
In other words, they do other things too.
Yeah.
They make signs and so forth. So if they give a church a banner, which costs them practically nothing, just putting the banner up, then they in turn create all this goodwill.
Goodwill, of course.
And they can do that all over town.
Oh, well, see, they were occurring favor with the Christian Scientists too. So, well, I was wondering, there also, it got me to thinking a lot about where you see these posts with the signs, the painted signs that say arrow points, and it says this way to the First Baptist Church or this way to the St. So-and-so's, whatever. And I thought, gee, I ought to start looking into that too, because even though they are maybe paid for by the church and made by a legitimate sign company, all that material they use looks exactly like any of the city signs that they have. And furthermore, they're always stuck in a piece of property that is obviously city property. I only know of one that's in somebody's backyard, oddly enough. So that's another thing.
What gets me is when they have all the tax money being used to support religion. It seems to be always there's an excuse. When we had the thing with the ball players here in San Antonio, the Kumamoto team. I don't know if you're familiar with that or not, but
Oh, youngsters.
There was for goodwill. They were going to play a game with the Kumamoto Japanese ball club. Well, all of a sudden, after having a year and a half to get funds up for it, they had to somehow the CYO didn't have enough money all of a sudden at the last minute. So we paid for airline tickets, round-trip airline tickets to send 20-some-odd people, students, coaches, and chaperones over to Japan and back. And they say, well, Japan paid for their accommodations while they were there. Well, that's certainly
Big
nice.
deal, yeah. We never did find out all about that. Now, that was the second go-around
No,
with
I
the
couldn't
ball
get a
team.
straight answer on
Yeah.
from anyone. I asked several times for them, and I kept hearing, yeah, we'll get back to you on the total. And it would not tell me the
Never.
total, but they were first-class tickets.
Was this a CYO project?
Well, it all started, the original thing was that they invited this Kumamoto team when we had this sister city arrangement. They invited them over here to play the Little Leaguers without asking the Little Leaguers first, or they just did it. So the little Kumamotans said, woo, yeah, sure, we want to go to the US of A. I mean,
Well,
we
that's
own
the
half
story
of
we
it,
hear.
so we want to go over and inspect our property. So they came over they were coming over, and they had accepted, and it's kind of embarrassing to say, no, you can't come now.
'Cause the Little
what
League
happened,
rules,
yeah, can't play but Little League, right?
Right.
So that was the beginning, and Jeff can take it from there and tell you all about that.
Well, you know, that's what we heard. We heard that, oh, we've discovered that the Little Leaguers can't play anyone but Little League, which I don't know if that was the truth or not. I don't know. It seems funny to me that that would have never been figured out in the meantime, that no communication would have been. But anyway, it wound up being the CYO team play, which is fine. You know, I mean, I have no problem with that as long as it's done privately. But when it was done, all of a sudden it was, oh, well, there's no place for the kids to play. And all the Catholic ball fields aren't upgraded enough. So we had Frank Wing contributed $15,000 of his discretionary fund, tax dollars, to upgrade Catholic ballparks, 2 properties and Catholic ball fields. Now, the trade-off was, of course, but we got a deal because, see, the city can use those at any time now for the next 10 years. That was what we were sold on.
We haven't played our first game out there yet, but would you like to join us for one?
Right.
We'll play at the one at Woodlawn.
Oh, I see what you've done.
The Freethought
Well,
All-Stars.
we're supposed to have access to it, so I thought we ought to apply because we'll never know whether this is true or not. But they said they would then keep them up, and that for 10 years the general public would have access to it. Well, I went out, Don Bosco was the other field. The one by the Chancery is one, and the one that Don Bosco out by the Missions was the other one. And my husband and I drove out there before the Kumamoto boys came over, while they were still working on it, and we went out there one Saturday afternoon. They were working overtime that afternoon, and I said I wanted to go down there and see the field, and they said, oh, we're just getting ready to pave it. And they said, well, if you hurry, you can go. So we drove down this thing, and it's nothing but a little skinny road, and it goes and goes and goes and goes forever, and it winds up in the parking lot of this ball field. And they were going to pave that road. Isn't that wonderful? So we got down there. I've never seen so much city equipment in all my life. Great big behemoth machines that were, you know, graders and pavers and I don't know what all.
It's amazing the amount of work that can get done for
$15,000.
Immediately, and yet you try to get a pothole fixed in San Antonio, and every time you turn around, it's a couple $100,000. I don't know. I don't get that.
Really funny. Yes, it was. But Jeff, you tell him about how well they kept it up, because we went out there a month later.
We went back there more than a month. We went back there almost 2 months later, and there was still trash from that same game. That's trash, flyers, and all this stuff had never been picked up. So, and when we spoke, when this was going to be spent, we spoke before City Hall, you know, citizens to be heard. You know, and I respectfully made my comments. I wasn't rude. I just said that I didn't appreciate my tax dollars going for this when I thought I'm all for the CYO. I'm all for, you know, boys having a good time, and I think it's really good. Baseball builds character and all that stuff, but it should be self-supporting, you know. Or if the city's going to do it, we ought to at least be able to have it on one of the 65 parks that the city's got ball fields in. You know, there's 65 ballparks in San Antonio. Are you telling me that none of them are up to snuff, that we could, you know, none of them are of the...
That's just about it, because there was a fellow that wrote in, I was very pleased to see that, where he said that the ballparks in town were in deplorable condition. So it's really doubly tragic that besides violating the church-state separation thing, that so much of our public property is going just to seed because they won't spend anything on that. Also, at the same time, the poor Little League team was having a frightful time. They have to earn their own money, and the city then said if they were going to sell food out there, they had to put in a bathroom or a kitchen or something. I don't know, that's going to cost them $20,000 to do it, which of course they couldn't begin to do it. So we thought that was terribly cruel, and we were very unhappy with that situation.
Well,
and
of
I'm
course,
sorry you missed it all. It was
Frank
fun.
Wing has always been a big supporter of CYO in his district, and his district has a large contingent of Catholic voters, and I'm sure that figures into the equation. And for my efforts, just going up there and expressing myself as a citizen, which is supposed to be my right, I got called ignorant.
Yeah.
He said, I don't appreciate these ignorant people.
Mm-hmm.
And he
We
got
were
up
all
and walked
ignorant.
out because there was 5 people, and some of them
Yeah.
who I didn't even know were up there who were
Okay.
protesting it, didn't
Now,
like
they
it.
printed this in the paper. This was Express News, Monday, September 5th, 1988. And this is the City Council Special Fund. So you can see what the tax thing looks like. These are the discretionary things. And here is Councilwoman Maria Berriozabal, who spent $15,000 remodeling of Christ the King Church nutrition site. Now, I'm sure you're aware that all of the church programs for the poor are funded by the federal government, by your tax dollar. You knew that, didn't you?
No. I
Most
didn't.
people don't. They don't. It's not something they advertise because the churches want to take credit for it, and they do. They don't even have to put up a sign saying, this lunch program is paid for out of the taxpayer's pocket. Because they put it on and they have the volunteers to serve the food, it makes them look good. It looks like they're doing the whole thing, and they're not.
So the people that go there to eat think that they're being fed by the church?
Church, of course. And the church, you hear that all the time. They do such good work. Well, the remodeling then was done with city funds. So not only do they get federal funds to conduct the program, they get city money to remodel the dining room because it wasn't good enough. So what do they do with all the money they make on all these little fairs and taco sales they have and things? The church is constantly running bingo games and things. What do they do with the money they get? They certainly don't spend it on the poor, obviously.
Well, since
And
they
they
don't
don't
have to
spend it
file
on
federal-
church property because the city takes care of that.
Well, since they don't have to file federal income tax reports either, I guess we don't have to know, do we?
I guess not. And then, of course, there was Frank Wing had, I think, 2 expenditures of, there was an obscure thing, $15,000, Japan-Texas meeting in October. I'm not sure what that was. That might have been that ball game. But it's very discouraging. There was one councilman who said, first he said, that was incorrect. They should not remodel those ball fields.
Was that Thompson? I believe
Yes,
Thompson
yes.
was,
I even wrote him a fan letter, but of
well,
course,
he's a lawyer,
when you hear
so
from
he's
him,
probably well versed.
yes,
in,
but then he backed down because he had all the rest of them pushing him, and then an atheist wrote him and said, "Oh, good for you, you wonderful man," and I never heard from him again, of course. Well, Julius, back to you again. I want to hear something about your background. I was wanting to know a little bit more about how you got into this and when you
Got into what?
well, this expressing free expression, so, shall we say, talking about things that bother you, and the church banners being one of them.
Well,
And
that's not the only thing that I discuss on my program.
Yeah.
I primarily discuss education because I'm a retired school teacher.
Yes.
And I talk about the problems with education, even though I'm a firm believer in our programs that we have in the schools. But I still reserve the right to criticize or to talk about, not necessarily criticize, but to talk about the things I don't agree with. And I do that with the city, and I do that with religion. I do that with anything because,
Yeah,
you
we
know,
do too.
as a veteran, I
Yeah.
served overseas in India for over 2 years. I feel strongly about my right as an American.
Good.
Before I wave anything else, I wave the American flag.
Uh-huh.
And that's primarily what I talk about. Anything that encroaches upon our way of government, I jumped on VIA last week. And of course, VIA's in a...
What did they do?
Well, VIA is a socialistic enterprise. You know, everybody, all the children and everybody in town thinks that good old VIA is a
yeah.
capitalistic enterprise. Well, that you can't possibly run that many buses, that beautiful, pay those wages, and have a daycare center for the employees under a capitalistic system. And when I say I'm an American, I'm a capitalist. I believe in our system, not socialism, which VIA is socialistic.
You're right about that. I had forgotten
And I told that to a young man. He's young, 27, 28 years old, and he said, "Oh, no, that's a company that owns VIA. My students think that these big buildings downtown are owned by the government, and they haven't the slightest idea who the government is." So there's a lot of confusion out there. And as an educator, I'm interested in that. I've had students get in an argument in my class, high school students.
Yeah.
One saying, "I'm a Catholic," the other says, "Well, I'm a Christian." And they're going back and forth. And I said, hey, you know, you're
guys.
both the same thing. No, I'm not.
No,
I'm a Catholic. He's a Christian. All right.
Okay.
So as an educator, you know, then that goes to the banners. You know, that's the only reason I jump on it. I have to tell you that my father is an Orthodox Jew from Russia. My mother's a Mexican-American from Mexico, born and reared in Mexico. Well, actually, she came over here when she was 4 years old. We lived in a very, very small town in West Texas, Van Horn. The Catholics are all over on the wrong side of town. In those days, the Mexicans and the gringos were separated by the highway. And so to go to the Catholic Church, you had to go to the other side. Well, my mother was a good friend of them, but instead of sending me to the Catholic Church or catechism classes or anything, I went with the rest of the football team, and we went to the Methodist Church. So I sang in the Easter cantata in the Methodist Church, and I played with the girls during the Methodist junior, or whatever it is, fellowship group and all that. So I grew up in this world of you know, everything's fine. Then I went to India, and I began to question when I saw people dying in the streets. And I actually did see people that I didn't know if they were alive or dead. I saw lepers. A friend of mine saw a lady give birth to a baby on the curb. You know, that was during the drought and during World War II, and it was real bad. And so then I began to say, well, you know, there's a monkey god over there, and there's other kind of gods all over the world. And then I'd go to meetings, and the chaplains would say, don't mess around with these Indian whores because they're not even human. And I, you know,
Chaplain said things
a chaplain.
like that?
And so at one meeting out in the jungle in a tent, I got up and tried to walk out, and the MP wouldn't let me. And I said, I don't have to stay here and listen to him talk about these people as if they're animals. He did call them that way. And so the MP said, you just sit back here in the back of the room, and you don't have to listen to that.
Gives me goosebumps.
But you see those injustices,
I know.
And then, as my daughter says, you know, you feel you have to charge a few windmills, and so I charge windmills.
Well, it's true. If you're committed to an ideal like freedom of thought or freedom of religion and freedom from religion, like Catherine and I am, funny things will get you upset. I found myself upset that our people over in Saudi Arabia can't have their religious services. And I just thought that was really a strange position to be in. You know, my wife was making fun of me because here I am. She says, you're an atheist. You know, what are you doing getting upset about these people not being allowed to have open, you know, practice of religion? I said, well, it's because that's their religion. You know, they showed it on television. They were having a little service at a makeshift altar on a forklift, you know, which I suppose you can always make do in the field, but still, it was offensive to me that in that country, you know, you're not allowed to be any other religion but Muslim.
Well, now that can happen anywhere.
Well, I think it's wrong wherever it happens. And I have a friend from
and that has happened before. If you go back and you check our history of Western civilization in the 14th century and the 15th, well, starting anywhere after the 5th century, you're going to see that a lot of terrible things have been done in the name of developing I call religion a collective consciousness. In other words, it draws people together, and I'm all in favor of it. If it helps unify a group, that's fine, but when it interferes with the nation's progress. See, all religions to me are governments because they govern.
They do.
They collect money, and they disperse money the way they think they should. Now, we have the United States, I'll go back to my American flag. We have the United States government whose job is to divide the common good and make sure that we take some here and we protect the nation with it. We take some from you and we feed the poor and we do it. Now that's great. That's the way it should be. But then we have the religious organizations who say, hey, let me collect some money and I'll take care of the poor. And now the United Fund, I jumped on them as I said last week, you know, the United Fund. They come along and they say, oh, let us collect the money for you, and we'll take care of the poor, and we'll take care of this. And I say, yeah, but along the way, Mr. United Fund, you got a beautiful office over there. You got all these gorgeous secretaries. You got these limousines. You go to these parties and all that kind of stuff. In this trickle-down business here, it doesn't all trickle down to the poor people. And I hate to do this, but to let you know how broad my spectrum of attack is here. I was a volunteer. I was asked to volunteer for the food bank. And so full time, here I go down to the food bank, and the young men down there said, would you please we have all these different churches coming in, and they stand all day long over one can cleaning it. And we need lots more boxes every day. We need 50 boxes a day, and they're turning out 10 or 15. Would you take it over? I said, I'm not going to do it. I said, those people have been coming here for 5 years, and I've been coming here for 2 weeks. They said, well, arrange it. I said, okay. I arranged it, and 2 days later, I was asked to go see the manager, the boss, so I just quit. So I'm the only person that was really fired. I mean, but I didn't tell you the reason why.
Yes, why?
The church groups that would come down there as volunteers, see, they have a right, or they got the right, to pack their own boxes. Now, a box has 50 pounds of food in it. Now, if you take any of the 50-pound boxes of food that are given out at the door, you don't know what you got in there. You've got some, you might have cake decorations. You might have just anything that H-E-B threw in the boxes and all that kind of stuff. But if you can go down there with your church organization, they let you pack your own boxes. So they would spend half their time saying, Maribel, do we need this over here? Yes, ma'am, we're going to have a party on such and such, and we're going to do... Well, they were shopping. And I said, we don't have time to shop. Yeah. Everybody buys, because you buy a box down there, 10 cents a pound. And so that's what, $5 for a 50-pound box. So every other organization came down, had to take potluck. But these religious churches came down, and they were turning out a 50-pound box that was worth $200, $300, because they picked just what they wanted. So I said, no. I'm supposed to expedite it. We have an assembly line. We have the rollers and everything like that. You just pack them in. They didn't like that.
No wonder.
Black lady went and complained about me trying to and they were preparing Thanksgiving dinner. We're going to need this for our Thanksgiving dinner at the church.
Oh.
So anyway, I'm in bed with the food bank. I'm now in bed with the United Fund and everybody
else. I like
else.
you better and better and better.
It's
You're
not
just
that I'm against them.
No, but
I'm not against them.
No, that's not it. But you stand for the things that we stand for. I mean, it's
Freethought,
wrong
is that what
for
it means? I really don't know.
Yes.
Well, freethought is an old term that is generally accepted along the lines of agnosticism, atheism, non-traditional religious. Freethinkers being the term used around the turn of the century, which some people have revived because atheism seems to be too heavy-handed for some people. You know what I mean? And there are people who are freethinkers who are not necessarily atheists, who are agnostics or who are very liberal in their interpretation of what religion is. Secular humanists, for example, would be freethinkers. But
heavy on
aside from the labels, which is we kind of use it as an overall label. We cover all kinds of topics on the show. But one of the things I wanted to ask you about, I was intrigued. You said you were an educator, and you're probably aware of the recent Supreme Court cases concerning the clubs in school. Have you heard about those? The Mergens case, where there's how do you feel about the allowing church groups in
where
school?
I taught, we had it wasn't the Watchtower, it's some other tower thing, meetings before school started and after school, and they were announced constantly over the PA system. In other words, there'll be a meeting of the such and such, the Lighthouse. The Lighthouse will meet at 7:30 in such and such a hall, and one of the teachers was the one that ramrodded this. Now, supposedly, you're allowed to have these meetings if they are brought up by the students themselves.
Right.
But what we had was practically a professional minister there who took it upon himself to ingratiate himself with the community by having church services in the school or after. All for good. I realize that, and he was a nice guy. He's a friend of mine.
Yeah.
The only thing is, we're back to this. Is it? Where do we draw the line?
Well, they don't want us to draw a line.
Well,
they only want to have tax-free properties. And
going back to Councilman Wing, who's a Mexican-American, right?
Right.
Okay. His ancestors come from Mexico, I'm sure, like mine did. All right? In Mexico, the Catholic Church cannot own anything. The priests for a long time couldn't even wear their habits.
Yes,
right. I mean, the Catholic Church has been oppressed in Mexico. All religion is oppressed in Mexico, which all countries do when there's a revolution. Because when there's a revolution and the country's in disarray, if that's a word you can use for it, why, that's a good time for the church to move in and take over, which they did in Russia, which they did everywhere. So what the first thing a revolutionary government has to do, Cuba, Mexico, Russia, anywhere, is to put their finger on the church activities. Now, Frank Wing's ancestors came from, they were very oppressed, I'm sure. oppressed in Mexico. But what happens is the oppressed become the oppressors. And the minute they come across, they get a chance to oppress everybody else. So, I'm all in favor of people bringing their culture with them, bringing whatever it is with them, but don't change the American way of life. I mean, we have, from Jefferson on, we have separated ourselves here, and we tried to keep, and the thing that has really saved this country is the fact that we have 265 different denominations of Christianity.
That's true. The more, the better. But the thing is, in certain areas, like here, where the Catholics are so predominant, you're beginning to get this sort of thing where the Catholic Church is favored by the city, by the state, and it will happen unless there are organizations who will say, no, this is wrong. They don't pay any attention to us, but we keep saying it anyway because.
Well, you go back to what my principals used to tell me. He says, but that's what the people believe. And I'd say, yeah, but that's not what we believe in the United States,
Right.
And we have to educate the people about what the United States, going back to capitalism. I mean, if you're going to be a capitalist, you're going to be a capitalist. Even if our savings and loans were all crooked, they were capitalistic. And yet you go to the Teachers Credit Union, and what is that? That's socialistic. Oh, I got letters. I wrote an editorial once in my radio station talking about the savings and loan, and being that they were using government buildings out at the air base, and they were doing this and that. I said, they're not capitalistic. Somebody called me a communist. I said, no, you've got it all mixed
Oh, that's
up.
the favorite ploy. Whenever you say something that is not popular and people don't want to think about it and put it in perspective, that's the first thing they say is you're communist.
But
we get that all the time.
The city, before, I don't know how much time we have, but before I'm through here, the city must, sooner or later, take a look at all the tax-exempt property.
They must, because
Well,
no one knows.
I got to speak up here for the head of the Bear Appraisal District, Walter Stoneham. He came and spoke to us one time, and
tries so hard.
he really has. Now, I'm not saying I don't have any idea what his particular religious persuasion is, but he's a fair man. I could tell that from talking to him. Although a lot of people are angry with him because they don't like having to pay their property taxes, he really is fair about things. And his position was the property tax exemptions in the city. There's two classifications. One is churches, and the other one is all other tax-exempt properties. Now, the other tax-exempt properties come up every year for renewal. The churches only come up when the head of the Bear Appraisal District asked for it. So he started asking for them, and this is how he got caught in the crack downtown with the Valero Energy parking lot, the parking lot with the First Baptist Church, and that's a case that we'll probably see reach the Supreme Court.
because it's on appeal. I couldn't understand that.
I think the masses, the people out there, sooner or later are going to say, this is too much.
I hope.
I saw a place that had a video store in it, selling tapes and renting tapes and all that. And then all of a sudden they went under. And then a church came in there. And they put curtains across the windows and all that. Now, do they quit paying taxes on that building?
Many times, yes.
I volunteered to work for the census in some building up here on San Pedro. Monstrous buildings, two of them. They're in a block there. And I went out there and I noticed a beautiful building. I asked the lady, I said, she was in charge there, and I said, this is a beautiful building, and are you the person in charge? She said, yes. We got to talking and found out it belongs to the Lutheran Church. Both those great big buildings belong to...
Julius, I can't believe it. We've got to do this again because you are fun, and that is
Sorry
all
about
for
that.
Freethought Forum right now, but we'll be back with our guest, Julius Sadowsky, another day. Thanks, Julius, for coming. Appreciate it. Jeff, thank you, too. And gosh, wasn't it fun?
I think as I please, and this gives me pleasure.
My conscience decrees, this right I must treasure.
My thoughts will not cater
To duke or dictator, no person can deny.